Welcome back, everybody. Happy Hanukkah. We continue this week with Parshat Miketz, and with the Midrash we're going to study is built upon the story of Yosef interpreting Paro's dreams. That's the Dibur HaMatchil, the opening words of the Midrash Tanchuma that we're going to study. But the content of this Midrash does not mention the story of Yosef at all, doesn't give any kind of Midrashic interpretation of the story in a direct way. So now it's really a mystery in that sense of what is the connection, what is the message of the Midrash as it relates back to the story of Yosef interpreting Paro's dreams. Now the content of this Midrash is based upon a story that takes place in Sefer Daniel. And there in the book of Daniel, there is another leader who has a dream that he would like interpreted. And that leader is Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Bavel, king of Babylonia. He was responsible for the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash. And in chapter 2 of Sefer Daniel, he has a dream and he's troubled by it, but he has a big problem. Unlike Paro in our story in Miketz, he remembers exactly what the dream was. He tells Yosef, and Yosef gives him the interpretation. Problem is, Nebuchadnezzar, he forgot. Nebuchadnezzar sheshachacha chalom u'pitrono. He forgot what the dream was, and of course that makes the interpretation of the dream that much more complicated. What he wanted was that he wanted someone to tell him what his dream was and what the interpretation of the dream was. And he had a lot of pushback from those who he turned to, from the sorcerers, the magicians, the Chaldeans, the Chasda'e, or a group of people who were charged with this mission, I guess, to try to interpret. And they say, look, we can't interpret the dream, Nebuchadnezzar, unless you tell us what the dream was. Sounds like maybe he was actually not admitting that he doesn't remember it, but he wanted him to say, you know, if you know my dream, then I'll know you're telling me the correct interpretation. It's an interesting test to see that you know that the interpretation is indeed correct. But they say to him, at some point they're going back and forth, and they say, look, we love you, Nebuchadnezzar. We want to help you. But Ano Chasda'e Kadam Malka v'Amrin, the Chaldeans responded to Nebuchadnezzar and they said the following: Lo ite enash al yabeshta di milat malka yuchal lahachvaya kol kavel di kol melech rav vishalit milad chedina la she'el lechol chartom v'ashaf v'chastei. The Chaldeans say to him, there is nobody on earth that can declare what is going on here. And because, as you know, no one is great and powerful, no one great and powerful king has asked such a thing of anybody. No magician, no Chaldean, no sorcerer has ever been asked this before, to tell what the dream was and then the interpretation. You're asking us to do something that we're not trained to do. We were never hired to do. And they say that there is no one who can declare this, who can say what is going on in this situation. And when they say that phrase, that there is none other, right? I'm picking up where it's Dalet if you're looking on the sheet. V'acharan lo itai. When they say there is no one else who can tell us there's no one else. So the Midrash says, V'aharon lo itai, that it should have said that Aharon, Moshe's brother, right? There is no Aharon. Right, which means to say, now the Midrash explains, Kishaya Beit HaMikdash Kayam, when there was a Beit HaMikdash that existed and stood, Haya Adam Holech Etzel Bnei Aharon, V'shoel B'urim V'tumim, U'magid Lo Et HaDavar. When there was a Beit HaMikdash, people would go to Aaron's children, I should say, to the Kohen Gadol, and they would ask the Urim V'tumim, that was a special plate that he wore, the Kohen Gadol would wear on his body. And it would give answers, umagilo et hadavar, and you know, then we could know certain things. Because they asked the Urim V'Tumim. V'achshav ein Beit HaMikdash kayam. But now they're saying to Nebuchadnezzar, there's no Beit HaMikdash. V'ein shoalin be'urim v'tumim. So you want to say, someone must be able to tell us. Like, no, there is no one who can tell us. The Beit HaMikdash doesn't exist anymore. We knocked down that temple of the Jewish people. They used to have someone who had the connection to God to get interpretations to questions like that, or the answers to questions like this. So Nebuchadnezzar is all upset. He says, Amar lahem, v'kach haya Beit HaMikdash yafeh u'netatem li eitza she'acharivenu. The Beit HaMikdash was so beautiful and wonderful that you could have dreams interpreted there, and not just interpreted. They could tell you what your dream was, and it was interpreted for you. And you told me, he's telling to all his advisors, and you told me I should destroy it? Miyad ka'as v'amar lahovada l'chol chakimei Bavel. Immediately Nebuchadnezzar got angry, and he said, off with all the heads of all the wise people in Bavel who told me I should destroy the Beit HaMikdash. And so, what happened? That's exactly what happened. Now we return to the Psukim in Daniel. The decree went forth, and the wise men were indeed slain, and they turned to Daniel, this Jew who's now in Babylonia. They were going to kill him too, and he basically said, "What's going on here?" And he said, "Oh, okay, give me a minute, or give me just one night, and I'll figure out by the morning the interpretation of. I'll tell you what the dream is, and I'll tell you the interpretation." And of course, Daniel gets it right, and he's able to get a tremendous amount of respect from Nebuchadnezzar. And the story goes on from there. Again, read the book of Daniel if you want the whole story. But we see here a very, very interesting shift. Nebuchadnezzar was the king when the temple was destroyed. Maybe there were people who advised him that we should destroy it, but he made that decision. But the Midrash paints Nebuchadnezzar, and this is maybe relatable. We've maybe seen this at times. Maybe we've seen this in our own lives, or you've seen these things in your workplace or whatnot. He just blames everybody else. When suddenly it turns out to be a bad idea to have destroyed the Beit HaMikdash, he blames everyone around him. Says, "You guys told me the worst thing I should do, and I followed your advice. Off with your heads." Whereas really, he's the one in charge. The buck stops with Nebuchadnezzar. And he takes no responsibility for the decision to destroy the Beit HaMikdash. And he just, piles on the blame and then actually kills them for it, for having given him such bad advice. Yosef. Now let's think of what's the connection of this to the comments that it's being built upon in our parsha. Yosef. Here he is, being brought out of prison. 2 years after he told the butler, "Oh, don't forget me." Suddenly he remembers him. And now he has his chance to make his mark, to show Paro he's a special person. And what does he do? He says, "It's not me. It's not me. I'm going to tell you the interpretation, but no, it comes from God." He starts off that way. He doesn't even say, "Oh, at the end, by the way, God helped me." He starts off by saying, "It's not me." This is the exact opposite of who Nebuchadnezzar is. Nebuchadnezzar he took credit when he wanted the credit. And when he saw that there was something that wasn't good, he's happy to blame other people. Yosef took responsibility. He said, if I do something wrong, with all getting the land of Egypt ready to deal with the 7 years of famine, he took it upon himself. He wasn't going to blame anybody else. And furthermore, he gave credit where credit was due. And this is a very different mode of leadership. I think the Midrash is giving veiled criticism here. That oftentimes people rise to positions of power by taking the credit for themselves and pushing blame to others when it goes wrong. But what the Midrash is telling us is that Yosef rose to fame and rose to power by being humble and saying that there's a God above me who's helping me. And it's not really because of me. I'm just the kli, I'm just the vessel through which God works. And by being open to being that vessel through which God works, that was what allowed Yosef to become essentially the second in command in the land of Egypt. That allowed him to be in position to help the world through a famine, to help Egypt survive through a terrible famine, because he was humble. It's okay if we take responsibility for whatever decisions we make, if we make the wrong decisions, and it's okay for us to give credit to others when we could have easily taken it for ourselves and make ourselves look great. Because at the end of the day, real leadership, whether it's an official leadership position or an informal one, like being a parent or a grandparent or some member of a work team, it's about showing that you can give credit to others and that you're willing to take responsibility for whatever happens that may go wrong. And if we do that, we will be trusted by those around us. They will respect us, and our leadership will be that much more effective in the same way that Yosef's was. Have a great week.